Hello, my name is Kris Nelson. My site is evolveconsciousness.org. Today I'll be presenting The Law of Freedom Part 6, Karma, Chaos, and the Belief in Authority. Authority. What is authority? The belief in authority, abbreviated as BIA, is accepting the claim of the legitimacy of some having the right to control others who don't initiate harm. If you don't obey authorities, they will initiate harm, that is, do violence to you, or send someone to initiate harm onto you. It is the false belief that some have the right to issue commands to others who must obey. Essentially, some are masters and others are slaves. Authority is slavery. And again, we're not talking about authority in other contexts, talking about the claim of legitimacy of some having the right to control others who don't initiate harm. Not being like an expert in a field and you're viewed as an authority in that sense. And, we could get into the problems with that, but specifically, this is about controlling others, and they didn't initiate harm, and people believing in that as being a legitimate way of life. That is what the belief in authority is, as I'm defining it here. In reality, there is no legitimacy to a claim of having the right to rule over another, to make your will supersede their will over what they may or may not rightfully do. Rights and what is right is based in objective truth, not subjective whims, wants, desires, preferences, or beliefs. You can check out my Natural Law, the Science of Morality presentation so far, 1, 2, 3, 4. The Law of Freedom is technically the fifth one, but I'm breaking up into several parts. Accepting the false claim of authority to control others is accepting slavery. Wanting authority is wanting slavery. So all the people out there who want authority, well, what you're wanting is slavery. Authority, collectivism, conformity. Authority is about getting your will obeyed by others. Other wills align to your will, or else they will suffer punishment for failing to do so. Collectivism gets people to align to what the group agenda or ideology wants them to be. It involves groupthink, social inclusion, feelings of belonging, acceptance, being part of something bigger than yourself, and also ostracism, exclusion, rejection, isolation, or violence if you don't conform to what others expect from you. So that would be in like the worst case scenario. You'd get people who, if you don't accept it, they're going to be violent to you. They're going to engage in false claims of ownership and think that they have a right to violate your property rights, your life, your body, other property, etc. The individual is expected to subsume their will and mind space. The individual is expected to act according to the will of another or others. Collectives or groups often integrate authoritarianism as well, but regardless, there is a negative consequence for rejecting obedience to that external source that you are supposed to give in to. Modern authority via government, contrasted with monarchy, dictatorship, etc., is sold through collectivism fantasies like we the people having the power. Ignore the fact that it's only voting for various rulers to decide for things, and if we pay attention and don't like what they do, we just vote someone else in the next round of elections every 4 years, or every whatever years, however many years it might be, wherever you are on the planet. In the meantime, essentially, obey your new master. They got voted in, you got to obey it. Maybe there's other people in other parts of government that people play this election game, and then you got to obey them until the next 4 years. But maybe those people at a lower level can force the higher level people out. There's all these hierarchies and everything in the authoritarian system. But essentially, you vote them in, they're your masters, you got to vote them out the next time. Unless they get caught, they get prosecuted by the legal system to show that they really broke some laws, and there's evidence, hard evidence for it, and then they can get removed from their position and they can go to prison or something. But usually that doesn't happen. It's very rare. Bypassing consequences. You can bypass the consequences of putting your hand in boiling water and being burned by using a flame retardant gel or some other mechanism to bypass the normal effect of being burned. If you have a flying or gliding device, you can not fall off a cliff to your death. You can also bypass the consequences to other actions. Like if you steal from another, which happens a lot in politics and in government, and it happens across government through taxation, well, you can do it covertly to not have you as the perpetrator known. So you can make people believe that you have the right to do it. Or you can do it and people don't know that it even happened. And you can do it and they know it happened, but they don't know it's you. So there's many ways you can do it covertly. You can also have a larger force on your side that defends what you did. Hence, the whole racket of I'm allowed to rob you, and these people are going to defend what the politicians say they're allowed to do. And those people would be the police, and in some cases the military. Or you can have belief systems or institutions present that protect you from facing consequences by those who seek to have the injustice debt paid back. So if anyone engages in their own attempt to defend their rightful property and obtain justice to get their debt paid back, well, you have these institutions and these systems that people believe in that protect the people doing the wrongful behavior, the immoral behavior, creating evil. And that's what the belief system of authority does, the system of control through the institution of government. That's what it is. It's a system of control, and it's instituted by what we now call government. And in the past, before the formalized government, it was a system of governance, of control, and that was monarchies or whatever have you, that it's existed for as long as we have recorded histories of civilizations. Almost everyone believes authority is legitimate and supports their violence, so it continues. Everyone believes authority is legitimate, the government's legitimate, and their violence is legitimate, on the most part. Like 95% of it's legitimate, and so it continues because it carries a legitimacy in people's minds who continue to support it. They keep playing the game. Karma and the belief in authority. So I just like to say that a lot of this is stuff already talked about, but it's being more specific and going into more detail. So this is going to be more specific, and you'll see there's a lot of stuff that's already been talked about, but it'll be explained in, I guess, more specific ways and in more detail and have more visuals to it. So we have our authority. This is the outline box on the left. And we have order givers and order followers. And the order givers, well, they're speaking and they're writing things. And they're telling people overall in overall society, what to do. Pay taxes, don't use cannabis, whatever millions of bullshit laws, legality that they come up with. And they're putting it in writing and speaking it. And down it trickles the chain of authority. into order followers who then become order givers to other order followers. And that's the so-called law that has to be enforced. So the order followers are enforcing it, and they create actions, and they violate everyone else. Because if you don't obey what the order givers say, the authorities, you don't do what they say, well, these guys are going to do actions and apply consequences for disobeying the commands of the higher up authorities, the order givers that create the legal system. So the order givers are basically saying, if they do list 1, so things that you're not allowed to do, list 1, or don't do list 2, things that we say you must do, find them, assault them, or murder them for defending themselves. That's the law. Do your job. And the order followers, well, they're doing the job of being immoral, of violating, denying rights, stealing, assaulting, murdering. And the violated, well, as I wrote here, we're a bunch of idiots overall because we vote for authority to have power over everyone. There's no direct negative karmic consequences to the violators. Everyone accepts the violations and takes on the negative karmic consequence via the action of inaction. Freedom is degraded. That makes us idiots. So the majority accept the belief in authority as either legitimate or in fear, apathy, cowardice, ignorance, and or laziness of standing up to authorities in moral unison with others. Each person is alone against the many people operating as authorities. That's the principle of quantity, as I refer to it. Because there are many people. So quantitatively, when we look at ourselves, we're not morally united. So we're all alone, or the few of us that band together, well, they're hundreds of thousands or millions enforcing the dictates of the few the few legal system creators, the so-called law makers. So immorality of control or enslavement is accepted by the majority. Again, the majority of us are accepting it. The quantity, the principle of quantity, the majority of us are accepting it, so that means that's what's being allowed to continue. Thanks to the shield of the BIA, the belief in authority acts as a shield, and ignorance of moral truth. And this is happening because of ignorance of moral truth. We collectively reap what we collectively sow by our inaction. Here's another infographic, so start at the top right. Again, it's another way to represent it with more detail than the previous slide. So we have the order giver, do X, and the order followers, well, yes, sir, and they do it. So this is where we get into the negative plane of causes as opposed to the positive plane of causes we'll have down below. So these are immoral actions, violence, the undue unjust force. They command, they coerce, they compel. This is a causal force being applied in reality, so it's the negative plane of causes. And then the negative plane of effects, as a result of that, is reality is affected. People are violated, they are harmed, and chaos is created. So this is the effect. This is the first level karma. Check out my previous presentations. Karma 1 is the action and the result it creates. And then karma 2 would be whatever comes back to them that is created by people in response to that. So people are negatively impacted, right? Negative plane of effects, violated, harmed. And you have scenario 1 where the responsive force is not engaged in. There's no action taken to stop violence. So we reap what we allow to sow. We allow this to be sowed, so we reap it. And then they continue to do it, and we keep reaping it. And, well, they're not going to reap anything. Not directly back to them. The taxes happen to them too or whatever. But they're not going to get a personal, direct, negative karmic consequence for what they've done. And we've talked about that a lot in the previous parts of the Law of Freedom presentations. So if people don't act, the violence is tolerated, accepted, normalized, justified, standardized. There is no direct karmic consequence to the violators. Action takers or order givers, those are the violators. Instead of a causal feedback to set things right and reestablish order, Instead of a causal feedback to set things right and reestablish order, chaos is the new normal. Chaos is normalized. Immorality stands. Freedom degrades. We get the collective karma of the aggregate supporting or condoning an immoral way of life. This creates a reality of enslavement where claims of ownership upon others persist. And instead of taking that scenario, well, you can take the other scenario, scenario 2, and that's saying no with teeth, scenario 2, instead of scenario 1. Well, this is the positive plane of causes in response to the negative plane of causes that was created before. Saying no with teeth, the moral right to use force against violence, to redress wrongs, reciprocate force against violence, stop immorality from gaining a foothold, because this is what happens here. If you don't do anything and it becomes the norm, standardized, it's justified, accepted, and tolerated, it keeps happening, and it's allowing immorality to gain a foothold. So this is a responsive force is engaged as opposed to the responsive force not engaged. So we're having karma back on the violent action taker. Karma is sent back and bring back or maintain justice and order, because we're bringing things back to the state where they were not doing something, because we're applying a consequence to make them stop doing what they're doing. So we can look at that as the second part of the karma in scenario 2, karma 2, and that's A. But we also have, that's just on the order followers, but we have the order givers that we can send back karma on the order givers for advocating that violence. So we can stop here, but we can also go here as well. Since they're not doing the physical actions, they're writing things down and speaking, and these are the ones doing the actions. They're more to blame, more at fault, more moral culpability. But both can have karma applied to them, a negative karmic consequence. So the positive plane of effects as opposed to the negative plane of effects, and that continues down here, these two are tied. So the positive plane of effects is direct karmic consequences, feedback, and causality. People are the equalizers for violations of morality. The karmic repercussions the violators are to receive come or don't come from people taking action to set things right. This requires numbers to apply pressure to get them to stop. Moral education to all is required, ultimately. So here's another way in more detail to look at scenario 1 and scenario 2. Order givers and the order followers are initiating a cause and effect. That's initiation. And these people here are possibly voting, try to change things, protesting to try to change things, signing petitions to try to change things, and that's essentially begging. And what ultimately happens is, well, the violation is just accepted, condoned, normalized overall, because they're not actually doing anything that's going to change it. They're just begging for a change. Master, don't beat me 7 days a week, only beat me 7 days a week. That type of thing. So the chaos condition remains because they just keep doing it. And well, that's what it is with prohibition, licensure, and taxation. None of that changes. People just complain over more egregious things, and then they might ratchet it back and then try it again in a few years. So overall, the freedom is degraded. Chaos and injustice is what has become the reality. And the collective karma is what we're getting. We're getting a collective karma of no direct negative consequences to the individuals who created the karmic debt. They have the karmic debt. We'll get into more defining karmic debt later. So the self-defense principle is not actualized. The causal feedback is inactive. Chaos stays on the aggregate collective because the chaos was created here and it just stays there. Everyone reaps the results as a way of life. Well, these are the results that they initiate harm against the property rights of everyone, and they just keep getting away with it. And that's the way of life. The result is that's the way of life, and it just repeats. So all of society partakes in the reaping of violence that was sowed. There's no direct payback, consequences, or repercussions to violators by natural, moral law, free will, causal agents. That would be humans in this case. And scenario 2, where we're sending back, there's a reaction. So the violation is rejected rather than being accepted or condoned, right? It's rejected. And so when there's no righteous response, we have the -1 created, and then, well, it's +0. There's nothing being done here. So the end result is a -1 as the condition. It's a negative condition. But when the -1 is sent and you're creating a positive response to reject the violation and put a stop to it, well, then you end up back at your default position before the -1 was created. So you have 0, and then you create a -1, and then your response is 0, so you end up just with the -1. But when you have the -1 and a +1, well, you end up back where you were. You're setting things right. So the chaos condition is reversed by the ordering action. This is creating chaos. This is bringing back order. This is the proper karmic balance. That's how things balance out for real. Chaos, order. Chaos, order. Yes, I'm repeating it. Gotta hammer it in. So freedom is restored. Order, justice as reality. Individual karma is applied instead of the karma staying at everyone violated and not being sent back. So we have negative karmic consequence to actions. The karmic debt is repaid to the violators. The self-defense principle is actualized justice. There is causal feedback localized back to the source cause. They reap what they sowed. There's balance back to the negative, to the origin. There's payback by natural, moral law, free will, causal agents. And here's another representation of the scenarios, not the scenarios, but the situation where you have violators and violetees, those who are violated, and relating to care and numbers involved. So you can have person 1 who does a wrong. There's a debt owed to P2, person 2. Person 1 violates person 2. Immorality is created or increased. There's a false claim of ownership made. So P2 is owed restitution, redress, rectification. So others, P2 can be included in there, but overall others, we're looking at the others. And if they do care about moral, so these are the two situations you can have when we're trying to respond. Usually it's better when it involves others. Again, the principle of quantity or the majority will have an impact on what actually happens in reality. Others do care about morality, justice. Person 2 has support for restitution. Person 2 and others make person 1 rectify their wrong. Or you can have the cowardly path where others don't care and they deny morality. Or maybe they're just loyal to P1 instead of being loyal to morality. So they're going to side with the violator, which is a lot of what we have in our society when it comes to government and the belief in authority. So P2, person 2, has no support for restitution, but they can always try to get justice themselves or not. And usually that doesn't work out very well if you're going to try to get justice yourself, even though you have the right, and it's right under moral law. It's not right under man's law. So person 1 can pay back a debt to person 2, and they revoke their false claim of ownership. Essentially admitting the wrong, engaging in that apology, giving back what was owed. Or if they don't do it themselves, well then person 2 and or others can act to engage in a payback mechanism to revoke the false claim of ownership and apply negative karmic consequences to them directly without them voluntarily doing it. So that's on trying to get the justice side, justice being reapplied. Whoops. And below that, the person is wronged. That's a minus. And then they're made right by the wrongdoer, and that's a plus. If P1 does not accept making things right, person 2 or others can make things right by applying consequences to not tolerate the wrong, the immorality, and deny the false claim of ownership. So the point is to deny the false claim of ownership, not to tolerate, accept it, support it, justify it, make it a standard, and normalize it in society. So justice and balance is restored for the negative debt created. Immorality doesn't gain a foothold of legitimacy. Doing nothing at all lets the wrong immorality stand unchallenged. So that's where person 1, person 2, there's no debt being repaid, and the false claim of ownership stands. Doing nothing at all lets the immorality stand unchallenged and sends the message that violating others is okay. That you can make a false claim of ownership upon others and get away with it. This sets the precedent for what the society will tolerate, accept, normalize, and standardize as the way of life. Immorality propagates and enslavement persists instead of being a temporary condition. So this is visualizing the belief in authority shield. When the aggregate accepts, tolerates, and supports the belief in authority, not two those, the belief in authority, so when the aggregate, not just one, but the aggregate, overall, everyone, the majority, accepts and tolerates and supports the belief in authority, with authorities creating inherently unrightful behavior, which is violence, negative consequences are rarely returned to the violators, which are the authorities. You just look at society. And I've mentioned, look at the previous presentations on natural law, the science of morality, and the previous ones on the law of freedom. And the main ones, the main violations are taxation, prohibition, and licensure. Making you do things that they don't have a right to make you do under penalty of greater violence. Stopping you from doing things you have a right to do under penalty of violence. So the authorities engage in immoral behavior, and they have a belief in authority shield. There's a shields up. Like in Star Trek and Star Wars or whatever, well, they got their shields up. And that only comes because people tolerate immorality via the belief in authority. So they're tolerating it. So they essentially have a shield. That the negative consequences are not coming back to them. Licensure, prohibition, taxation. Nothing's coming back on them for doing that because overall we're a bunch of retards who accept it because we believe in authority. We believe in the legitimacy. Back on the first slide. Institutions of authority are protected from repercussions by having the support of the majority who believe in the legitimacy of authority. Creators of immoral behavior are shielded as no one applies consequences. This creates persistence, covert injustice, immorality, or slavery. Yet another representation to hammer it in. So the belief in authority has mind control protection. That's the shield. The belief in authority is a mind control protection that protects authorities. Authorities are insulated from the consequences to immoral actions, from retributive actions by those who oppose their violence, because the majority are in this mind control of giving them protection. So they would defend the authorities. If the authorities came under attempts to apply justice to them for their violations that are happening in any moment, well, the majority of the people would defend them. So they are insulated, even from those who want to oppose their actions, because the rest of society would continue to support the authority because they lack moral truth. They don't have the knowledge and then the understanding. So the authorities have the so-called right to control, and they have the right to initiate harm. And then everyone's just being harmed and initiated, and nothing's coming back on them because of this belief in authority. It acts as a shield where nothing is getting through. So it's a one-way cause-effect. There's no reaping individual consequences to violators. There's no reciprocity of justice to injustice or immorality created. Karma is diffused to all instead of the debt paid back reciprocally. Creation of defensive response is prevented. That's the shield. If righteous defense is enacted, the majority are a shield that wrongfully defend authority. So the negative karmic consequences, we have the sowing of the authorities to everyone else. And then there's the reaping back of the negative karmic consequences for what they created. They reap it back. And that's the natural flow of causality, of action to reaction, back to them. That the reaction back is supposed to make them reap what they sow by applying negative consequences as a deterrent, to not repeat it, to send a message for other people, and also to apply consequences to not have them do it again. And that's cause and effect, and you reap what you sow in that sense of the term. But what we have is initiation of harm, and then it stops there. So we're mind-controlled, insulated flow. Instead of a natural law flow of causality, it's a mind-controlled, insulated flow from the belief in the legitimacy of authority. The belief in authority, natural law flow, is one way. It makes the natural law flow one way, so it's not the balanced ma'at, the balanced natural law flow. There's no retribution, redress, restitution, rectification, payback of karmic debt. The number 2 group isn't creating karmic consequences for number 1 to reap. So you ask the question, does the aggregate in a situation, in the condition of the world, does the aggregate accept the belief in authority? Well, if it's yes, then the aggregate is in a state of fear, apathy, ignorance, cowardice, or laziness. Because of that, they have a lack of moral unity. And they're accepting violence. They're not applying direct negative karmic consequences because they're doing nothing. That's what's happening. They're doing nothing. Karma is not returned. Righteousness is shirked by free will. Free will is choosing, we're going to accept it, we're going to do nothing about it. So chaos isfet is left to everyone for failing to be righteous against wrong or evil. So that's where karma is distributed and dispersed. It remains where it's created at. It's put at our feet. The chaos is put at our feet by the actions, the negative behavior, the immoral behavior, the initiation of harm. So it's put at our feet, and that's where it stays. And that's where the karma stays, because it's not being sent back. The chaos stays there. But things could be different. But if the aggregate does not accept the belief in authority, well, then we'd be in a state of love and care and knowledge and courage and will, and we'd be in moral unity because we wouldn't be accepting it, because we'd be rejecting that violence. We'd be applying negative karmic consequences to those who do it or try to initiate false claims of ownership, and that's engaging in payback. We're paying back. We're giving it back. Where karma is returned, it's reciprocated. Payback. The righteousness is taken up by free will instead of being shirked, and the chaos is fit to those truly deserving it. Chaos and isfet is being sent back to those deserving it. And we have order in the aggregate instead of having chaos in the aggregate for everyone. So what we have is a license to violate when we're talking about authority. What we don't stop from continuing will continue, like false claims of ownership, slavery. These are taxation. Overall, the biggest ones, as I've mentioned, are taxation, licensure, and prohibition. Authority has a license to make false claims of ownership. The taxation, licensure, and prohibition are false claims of ownership. And these are backed by everyone who support them. No consequences are applied by the aggregate, so they can continue to do them indefinitely. Authority continues to do them indefinitely because no consequences are applied because everyone accepts it. Those who do the immoral behavior aren't getting individual repercussions. The negative karmic consequences are in the aggregate, manifested as the condition of persisted immorality or slavery that everyone lives within. That's what the chaos and isfet that is sent to everyone, and that's the condition we live in, the condition of chaos. It's not a condition of order. The order followers, like most of society, think good or order is being done, and they have the responsibility of enforcing those legal restrictions. They are believed to perform a necessary behavior that the majority desire. Most of everyone wants it to be this way, to have slavery, and that's why it is this way. Because the majority desire that order followers perform that function, and that order givers and lawmakers perform their function, and that's why it remains that way. Because the majority, the aggregate, the collective, that's what everyone wants. So there's two paths to end slavery. I went into this in Natural Law, the Science of Morality, Part 4 on morality. And they both require numbers to work. And that's what we're talking about. In the Law of Freedom, the Law of Freedom is based on aggregate moral behavior, gets you true freedom. Aggregate immoral behavior gets you slavery. So we can engage in physical defense, and that's less optimal. What is physical defense? Well, it's morally justified physical force to end violence, slavery, evil. Numbers of people band together to make the architects and enforcers of the control system stop. All, or the majority, most everyone, are morally united to apply consequences. But this should be avoided until it's necessary. It's always on the table. But again, you need the numbers, you need the majority. So before we get to there, we got another avenue. We got to work to do non-physical defense, and that's more optimal because it doesn't involve a bloodbath. So that's where non-physical confrontation of moral education to stop creating violence, slavery, or evil. We have to morally educate everyone to stop doing violence and not support the enslavement system as much as they can. To stand united, ready to apply defensive force. So if in that moral education, this is part of the understanding that's developed, and you got to be ready to do this because we're trying to get people to stop doing violence. And then if they get outnumbered and they don't want to stop, well, then those of us who outnumber them, who are morally educated and ready to do this, well, we can do it successfully. Either way, it requires people to act. There's no savior or force that's going to do it for us. And it will go on until we act to influence others to stop. So a world without order followers, that's what we're looking for, right? And that's the end target for moral education and pressure to stop being immoral. Who is the end target for moral education and pressure to stop being immoral? Well, that's the order followers, because they enforce the violence and enslavement. The slave system wouldn't exist otherwise. No one would be following orders to violate rights, and no one would be subsuming will to that of others. They wouldn't be subsuming their will to the will of others giving out orders. The order giver authorities are inventing laws or giving orders, but no one would be obeying or enforcing them, so they would just be looked at as a bunch of psychopaths, which is what I mentioned here. These are psychopaths. So the order givers, they can't convince others to give them the power over their lives anymore. If the order followers eventually, those aren't going to be the first to be influenced. That's why we got to influence other people. But these are the end target. In the end, these are the ones that are going to be influenced. And then, when they stop following orders and they're not giving their will over to others, well, then the people giving orders, well, they're not going to have power over their other people's lives. There's just going to be word spells of mind control that have no effect. There's going to be no protection for their delusional moral. There's going to be no protection for their delusional immoral claims. We're going to be morally educated to see them as mentally deranged tyrants, and we're going to see them as psychopaths, and we can deal with them via the self-defense principle, those who dare to try anything. So there's going to be no more belief in the right to rule, to control. There's going to be no more obedience, and the enslavement con game is going to be over. And that's the end goal. So we get to karmic debt, defining karmic debt. So in the positive sense, you do good to others, right? There's a benefit to others. Well, there's no karmic debt created there in a positive karma. You can engage in reciprocity to benefit them in some way, to repay them for their good deed. And this is favored and optimal to keep this cycle going of they're doing good to me, I'm going to do good to them, or I do good to them, they do good to me, and we keep it going, right? Makes a nice, good, harmonious circle. But it's not required or necessary. You don't have to return it. You don't have to repay them for their good deed. And the consequence can be that you have a loss of future help. If they help you and you don't help them back, well, then they're going to stop helping you. And they might even stop wanting to be in any relationship with you. No more friendship. They're not going to want to talk to you. That could be what happens. So karmic debt is when we're talking about karmic debt, it has to do with doing evil to others. You're creating a detriment, not a benefit to others. And that's when karmic debt is created. So property loss is incurred by others. A negative is created. And we can look at debt in money is a negative. It's an imbalance that needs to be repaid. Balance is achieved when the debt is repaid. Not repaying a debt is breaking your word. Because when you took the debt, well, you said you'd repay someone. And you're not repaying them, so that's breaking your word. And someone will be at a loss of their property not being repaid. Or even whether there's no money and it's like, well, here's my 10 cords of wood and you got to pay me back and whatever we agree, and then you don't, well, then they're out their 10 cords of wood in exchange for whatever, you were going to give them that you said you would do. So karmic debt is an injustice which creates an imbalance. Balance of justice is restored when rectification is made where the property loss is restored, usually with a penalty for having to put someone through the trauma or distress of violating their rights, and that penalty is a disincentive to not repeat the wrong and evil. Because I've explained this before. If you just take $100, then you give it back, and then you go take it again and they catch you, and then you give it back. Well, you can just keep doing this forever until they don't catch you or something. But when you have a penalty, then you're losing, you're at a loss for something because you engaged in that immoral behavior, and that's an incentive not to do it. But you can have a first offense, can make the penalty optional if the victim desires. You can say, oh, well, no, I'm not going to apply the penalty, just repay me. And that's a less negative learning opportunity. So you got caught. Here's a learning opportunity. You fucked up once. Okay, don't do that. And that's the only free pass you get. So when we have karmic debt collection. And we can look at it as an enforcement and an impediment. So the enforcement of our karmic debt collection and the impediment to that collection. So there's different dimensions. One is physical superiority. Physical superiority, so you can enforce that debt collection when you're stronger than them. But an impediment to that is when they're stronger than you. And we can have technological superiority for debt collection as you have better or more weapons, so you can go collect on your debt. But the impediment to that is if they have better or more weapons. And we can have quantitative superiority, where you have the numbers on your side via moral unity to make a violator pay back their debt. Or that quantitative superiority can be on the side of the violators and act as an impediment, where they act with numbers and you don't, so you're outnumbered. And that's what we have now. Right now what we have is technical superiority in most places because they've disallowed the populace to have the same level of weaponry, and they have quantitative superiority because they're larger in numbers. And we have intellectual cunning as another dimension where you can outwit them in strategy or ideas. For example, plan a cunning way to deal with them or get lucky in outwitting a violator. And an impediment was, well, they outwit us with strategy and ideas like, oh, I don't know, the belief in authority of convince the aggregate to accept false ideas like authority, so we collectively accept their violence or dominance. Yeah, that's what we got now. It's working out well. So out of the 4 dimensions that I've had here, you could probably maybe do more, but this is what I've thought of. They have us on the impediment side for 3 of them. And the only way you could have physical superiority is on a one-on-one basis. And that's rarely the case, because they're a gang. They operate as a gang. Karmic affection. The belief in authority insulates the manipulators from receiving personal, direct, negative karmic consequences. The negative karmic consequences are applied to everyone in the form of living in the persistence of violence, enslavement that we tolerate. Only those with a correct perception of reality are aware of the truth and can see the chaos or slavery. The rest want to see authority continue as a form of so-called order. Only the seers can see the negative aggregate karma at work, which even the violators live in. Many of the manipulators of the control system favor the negative condition because they benefit from it by exploiting others, such as the banksters, the politicians, or the so-called elite. The main builders, police, military, government workers, usually have no additional consequences for continuing to implement the enslavement system. Some of the dominators, the builders or the manipulators, just enjoy the control they exert on others, as they want power over others. Some of the manipulators, the dark occultists, might not be rich, but enjoy influencing the visible powers. So that's the lower echelons, the lower level manipulators like the politicians, etc., to implement their agenda. So they're the idea makers, they're the agenda setters, they're the ones who are behind the scenes with the hidden hand control, even more hidden than what most people don't see, such as the the think tanks, the global organizations, the banksters. So when is authority reaping karma? When is that happening currently? Well, we have behaviors, and we have who's affected by that violence of behavior, and the individual karmic payback. Is it possible? Is it happening? Is that individual karmic payback happening? So these are just examples to show how it's happening. Are they reaping karma? So we have accepted immorality, right? That's the overall condition. Taxation, licensure, prohibition, other things that are accepted immorality, that's the behavior. Who's affected by that violence? Everyone, the aggregate. Is there individual karmic payback? No, not happening. Another behavior. So authorities could abuse their defined power. So say they give a beating to someone. So who's affected? Well, the individual is given a beating, right? Usually it's one or a few more of the gang beating another, or it's several of the gang beating other individuals in a group somewhere in a protest or something. So it happens to an individual. And is there individual karmic payback? Maybe, sometimes. Sometimes they'll have consequences. Maybe they'll be fired, or they'll have, whatever, something else happen to them. Maybe they'll go to prison. Sometimes it happens. Most of the time it doesn't. And then we have another situation where someone engages in defense against violence through the self-defense principle, so they fight back against the beating. So there's an order follower who gives a beating, beating a protester, or who's affected the individual, and they're going to fight back. So the individual who initiated the violence is going to have an individual karmic payback, because they're going to feel repercussions. Their violence is not going to be tolerated by that individual, and they're going to fight back. So these are situations where it happens, but you can see it's always on an individual basis, when things happen to other individuals and that they directly apply the consequence back. But when it's in the aggregate, they're never facing consequences when it's applying to everybody. At least for the three I mentioned: taxation, licensure, prohibition. Not happening. They're not facing consequences. You can think of the scamdemic, what happened. Is anyone going to be held to account? What's going to happen to them? Okay, maybe they'll be forced to resign. Are any of them going to go to prison? Yeah, right. Okay, maybe that'll happen. Highly doubtful, but, maybe it'll happen. But highly doubtful. So, in that sense, something happened to the aggregate. There was immorality that was accepted, I guess, by the majority technically. You could say maybe it was 60, 50, or even 40%. But it still went on, because within that, even if it was 70% that didn't accept it, or 80%, those people, along with the others who did accept it, are still in the 99% majority that accepts the legitimacy of authority. So was anything going to change? No. Because authority could still keep doing it anyways, because everyone accepts what the authorities as a legitimate way of life. True freedom requires maintenance to maintain the integrity of the pure state. So I went into this in the other law of freedom parts. So one drop of red paint in pure blue isn't noticeable. The red gets mixed in with the blue, which isn't the original pure blue anymore. Persistent slavery can be created and mixed into the aggregate condition, taking away the state of true freedom. So the corollary is true freedom is that pure blue paint. You introduce persistent enslavement into the aggregate, and what you're going to get is not the pure blue. You're going to get not true freedom. So repeated immoral behavior is creating persistent slavery, still mostly freedom, but not true freedom. Versus on the right, immoral behavior is stopped, true freedom is restored. So the law of freedom is that not all freedom is not true freedom. So not all blue means it's not a true blue, it's not pure blue. So bullies and the need to put them in their place. Bullies either think they have the right to do what they want to others, like control their forms of property, or know they don't have the right, but just want to do it. They keep bullying to get their way because they aren't challenged on their violence to have consequences applied. If they did and got hurt, they would think twice again. They would think again the next time their immoral desires arose to take what they want. A bully is a taker, a thief, who won't stop until they see the benefit, and the benefit is not being hurt. Otherwise, there is no downside, only the benefit of getting what they want. Bullies stop when they get taught there is a negative consequence that outweighs what they want to get, or they are made unable to repeat their action, if you know what I'm saying. You can either get taught by negative consequences to choose not to repeat it, or they can get made to not even be possible to repeat it. The government is a big bully, a gang with numbers that defend each other. With weapons they deny others the right to have. They also have supporters that stand with them. To physically stand against the largesse of this bully also requires a large quantity of people. Moral unity to influence the bully to stop or outright physically put a stop to the bullying is required. So either moral unity in teaching moral education or moral unity in physically doing something about it. It always requires that quantity. So why accept the belief in authority? Collectivism is clinging to group dynamics, wanting to be accepted by others, and belonging to something through a shared identification. A group or institution like government can provide advantages for survival. like being taken care of in some way, being taken care of through social assistance. So monetarily, that's your survival, being taken care of in defense. Well, you don't have to defend yourself. That's the police. That's the military. And then you identify. Well, you identify through that thing that you desire, and then you vote. And then you identify with the certain politics that you identify with, the left, the right, center, green, whatever in between, doesn't matter. So you engage in group dynamics, engage in the collectivism of wanting this collective monster, this monstrosity, to take care of something for you, take care of your retirement, take care of this, take care of that, take care of security, take care of safety. And this motivation for survival, in disregard for what is morally right, is based in fear. So you can have a motivation for survival, but morality has to be part of that, has to be at the top, has to be that foundation under you or that authority above you. And when you're engaging in that motivation for survival in disregard for fear, in disregard for what is morally right, well, that's based in fear, because then you're accepting the belief in authority, and you're accepting all these immoral ways because you don't even have morality within you to even be able to align with it and choose it over the thing you want to support, because you're in fear of safety of various kinds that the government plays the role, the parental figure, in providing. So the causal factors for the desire for the immoral control of authority, the government, stems from ignorance, fear of owning personal responsibility, self-loathing, which is the lack of self-love and self-respect, and abandonment. And this is a childlike mentality, because that's the mindset of children, and that's how people get into this. Abandonment, overall, is the abandonment of being morally raised in the definitive knowledge of the objective difference between right and wrong. People don't have that. They're abandoned by their parents in being morally raised. They're not truly raised. And there's other aspects. So then they're going to accept methods of enslavement. So that means they don't actually love themselves because they're accepting to be enslaved. And they don't want to take on the responsibility of doing something about it. They don't want to learn moral truth, to be responsible for living up to moral truth. So they want to remain ignorant. Anyways, you can check out Mark Passio's Fear of Evil tree. The Tree of Ultimate Evil, Tree of Evil, something like that. He goes into it in the 140s, I think, in that area, 150s, 160s, and goes into explaining that in more depth. And I think I covered it in part. I might have covered it in some of the Natural Law, the Science of Morality, in part. Yeah, I think I did. Some aspects of it, yeah, related to this self-loathing and personal responsibility and ignorance. That's the morality presentation. Anyways, not to digress there. The failure to identify these causes, address them, and heal them prevents people from growing into true adulthood because they're in a childlike mentality. It keeps them hopelessly identified with the collective group dynamic and caught in the cycle of defending that which they identify with that keeps them as irresponsible irresponsible children. So they're defending the thing they identify with, authority, because they believe in it, and that keeps them irresponsible children. It's also defending their enslavement and preventing us all from living and coexisting in peace and harmony. Win or loss received from creating chaos. So here's 4 general categorizations you can put in how chaos is being created. You can have self-created chaos, and that's immoral chaos. Like when you put your hand on the fire and you get burned, well, that's only you harming yourself with foolish behavior. It's a net loss to you. Then you can have immoral chaos, and that's an individual loss for the immoral person creating the chaos. They attack someone, but this person engages in self-defense by themselves, solo. There's a rectification, a payback. The unjust chaos is created, and there's just self-defense as a response. The violator should get more chaos overall as they reclaim their property if possible, and then there's an additional penalty. So there's a net loss overall. And then the claim of ownership is nullified. They've rejected the false claim of ownership upon them by that violation, and the freedom level is maintained. And then there's immoral chaos where the aggregate wins. So instead of at a loss, well, they're at a win because they attack someone. There's a self-defense attempt maybe by the person who's alone. That's the possibility, they're alone. And they may do it, they may not. So if they do it, there's too many to win, so they're not going to win. Some of them might get hurt, but they're going to be hurt overall the most. The victim suffers the most. There's unjust chaos created. Violators get less chaos than given. There is a net win for the violators. Immorality wins. The claims of ownership are unrevoked. They tried to revoke them. They said no, but they still got away with whatever they were going to do. They didn't get punished. There was no penalty. So freedom is degraded. And then there's a situation where you can have immoral chaos, the aggregate loss for those doing the attacking, because the defense of the one is combined with the defense of the many. Again, the quantity, the importance of quantity. There's unjust chaos created. The violators get less chaos initially, but others care instead of not caring. The others don't not care, and they don't side with the attackers. They're siding with this person. So they're not going to tolerate what happened. They're going to organize and pay back consequences, and the freedom level is maintained. Creating suffering or chaos, and how we create self-inflicted suffering or chaos. So this is explaining the previous one, I guess, in a different way. Similar but different. Additional information. That's what I've been doing, breaking things down, explaining them. There's a lot of similarity, and then it shifts it and explains it a bit differently. So here we have unrelated to immorality, so it's amoral, and we have related to morality. And so unrelated to morality is when it's self-created, it's self-inflicted, the action of self to self. You burn your hand. And then there's other created, so it's other inflicted. It's the action of self to other, where the other person could engage in assault. So they're creating that suffering and chaos to others. And then there's self and other created. So it's self-inflicted because there is other created, but there's also the self-inflicted aspect of the inaction of the self to suffer that's created by others. And that would be authority. An example of this is the authority, and that's what we all live in, where we have the inaction and we suffer as a result of our inaction on top of the initial suffering that happens and then gets repeated. So the suffering is aggregately deserved for aggregately rejecting moral unity rather than sending it back, payback, repercussions, penalty, making it stop. We're just allowing it to continue, and it keeps repeating. And that's in the way that it's deserved. So self-inflicted suffering is chaos created by yourself, either directly by your own actions, such as burning your hand, or indirectly by our collective inaction to stop immorality evil from gaining a foothold and enslaving us. Where does the chaos end? In the aggregate, the collective society, or is it being returned and ending at the initiator of violence as completing the cycle? So if it's ending at the aggregate collective, that's because it was created. The initiation of violence created chaos, and we're all living in it through the authority, the belief in authority. So the initiators, they're winning. All of the controllers, the controller class, the order givers and the order followers, they are winning. They're getting what they want. And what we get as a result is the slavery and injustice and chaos. And that's created, and it's an unnatural condition. Because when when you're returning it, when you're returning the chaos back, yes, you get that initial chaos, but it doesn't stay there. It gets returned back. And that's making the initiator lose. So initially, you could try to do something to many individuals, but if those individuals stand united and say no, and they fight back, then overall, in the end equation, well, the initiator loses and they're going to win back their freedom. So what they get is freedom, justice, and order. And that is the default that was already there, the natural condition. It's only when the initiators of violence created the unnatural condition by creating violence that then it took this state away. And I've gone into that in the previous parts of the Law of Freedom presentations. So there's a net gain for the higher controllers. The dark ones get more order than chaos versus the rest of us. The controllers, manipulators, or dark occultists don't have the real power of converting understanding into the wisdom of right action. They can't ever create true order, as it's not the wisdom of right action that is being created. They are only creating chaos. They only care about gains or so-called order for themselves personally, where it's about getting more than others, usually by means of control and deception, like the monetary fraud, government coercion, mind control, etc. A world in chaos with them ruling as masters is fine for them, as long as they are the ones on the throne of trash, where they are above others in some way. And in this way, they have more order relative to others. They live in the chaos that they create in the aggregate. They are part of the aggregate. But as long as they put others into a more chaotic state than them, which is created in the aggregate by going against the positive aspect of the law of freedom, then they view that as a win, because other people are in more chaos than them. They have more order relative to them because they position themselves through their control and manipulation to be at an elevated position. They don't have true order, and no one else has true order, but they have more order in their lives because they have less chaos in their lives relative to the greater chaos they impose upon others. So that's my presentation for the Law of Freedom Part 6, Karma, Chaos, and the Belief in Authority. I thank you for your time and attention, and see you for Part 7 eventually. Take care. Peace.